The faithful shepherd. When Jethro gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses as wife, he said to his future son-in-law, "I know that your father Jacob took his wives, the daughters of Laban, and went away with them against their father's will. Now, take an oath that you will not do the same to me." And Moses swore not to leave him without his consent, and he remained with Jethro, who made him the shepherd of his flocks. By the way he tended the sheep, God saw Moses' fitness to be the shepherd of his people, for God never gives an exalted office to a man until he has tested him in little things. Thus Moses and David were tested as shepherds, and only after they had proved their ability did God give them dominion over men. Moses watched over the flocks with loving care. He led the young animals to pasture first, that they might have the tender, juicy grass for their food. The somewhat older animals he led out next, and allowed them to graze off the herbs suitable for them, and finally came the vigorous ones that had attained their full growth. And to them he gave the hard grass that was left, which the others could not eat, but which afforded good food for them. Then God spoke, "He that understands how to pasture sheep, providing for each what is good for it, he shall pasture my people." Once a kid escaped from the flock, and when Moses followed it, he saw how it stopped at all the watercourses, and he said to it, "Poor kid, I did not know that you were thirsty and running after water. You are weary." And he carried it back to the herd on his shoulder. Then said God, "You have compassion with a flock belonging to a man of flesh and blood. As you live, you shall pasture my flock, Israel." Not only did Moses take care that no harm should come to the herds under his charge, he was also careful to do no injury to men. He always chose an open meadow as his pasturing place to prevent his sheep from grazing on private property. Jethro had no reason to be dissatisfied with the services rendered to him by Moses. During the 40 years Moses acted as his shepherd, not one sheep was attacked by wild beasts, and the herds multiplied to an incredible degree. Once he drove the sheep about in the desert for 40 days, without finding a pasturing place. Nevertheless, he did not lose a single sheep. Moses' longing for the desert was irresistible. His prophetic spirit caused him to foresee that his own greatness and the greatness of Israel would manifest themselves there. In the desert, God's wonders would appear, though it would be at the same time the grave of the human herd to be entrusted to him in the future, and also his own last resting place. Thus he had a presentiment at the very beginning of his career that the desert would be the scene of his activity, which not only came true in the order of things, but will also be true in the latter days, when he will appear in the desert again, to lead to the promised land the generation arisen from their graves that he had brought forth from the Egyptian bondage. Wandering through the desert, he reached Mount Horeb, which is called by 6 names, each conveying one of its distinctions. It is the mountain of God, wherein the Lord revealed his law; Basban, for God came there; a mountain of humps, for the Lord declared all the other mountains unfit for the revelation, as crook-backed animals are declared unfit for sacrifices; mountain of home, because it is the mountain that God desired for his home; Sinai, because the hatred of God against the heathen began at the time when Israel received the law thereon; and Horeb, sword, because there the sword of the law was drawn against the sinners. The burning thorn bush. When Moses drew near to Mount Horeb, he was aware at once that it was a holy place, for he noticed that the passing birds did not land on it. At his approach, the mountain began to move, as though to go forward and meet him, and it settled back into quietude only when his foot rested on it. The first thing Moses noticed was the wonderful burning bush, the upper part of which was a blazing flame, neither consuming the bush nor preventing it from bearing blossoms as it burned. For the celestial fire has 3 peculiar qualities. It produces blossoms, it does not consume the object around which it plays, and it is black of color. The fire that Moses saw in the bush was the appearance of the angel Michael, who had descended as the forerunner of the Shekinah herself to come down presently. It was the wish of God to hold a conversation with Moses, who, however, was not inclined to permit any interruption of the work under his charge. Therefore, God startled him with the wonderful phenomenon of the burning thorn bush. That brought Moses to a stop, and then God spoke with him. There were good reasons for selecting the thorn bush as the vessel for a divine vision. It was clean, for the heathen could not use it to make idols. God's choosing to dwell in the stunted thorn bush conveyed the knowledge to Moses that he suffers along with Israel. Furthermore, Moses was taught that there is nothing in nature, not even the insignificant thorn bush, that can exist without the presence of the Shekinah. Besides, the thorn bush may be taken as the symbol for Israel in several respects. As the thorn bush is the lowliest of all species of trees, so the condition of Israel in the exile is the lowliest as compared with that of all other nations. But as the thorn bush releases no bird that alights on it without lacerating its wings, so the nations that subjugate Israel will be punished. Also, as a garden hedge is made of the thorn bush, so Israel forms the hedge for the world, the garden of God. For without Israel, the world could not endure. Furthermore, as the thorn bush bears thorns and roses alike, so Israel has pious and impious members. And as the thorn bush requires ample water for its growth, so Israel can prosper only through the Torah, the celestial water. And the thorn bush, the leaf of which consists of 5 leaflets, was to indicate to Moses that God had resolved to redeem Israel only for the sake of the merits of 5 pious men, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Aaron, and Moses. The numbers represented by the letters composing the Hebrew word for thorn bush, Senah, add up to 120, to convey that Moses would reach the age of 120 years and that the Shekinah would rest on Mount Horeb for 120 days. Finally, in order to give Moses an illustration of his modesty, God descended from the exalted heavens and spoke to him through a lonely thorn bush instead of the summit of a lofty mountain or the top of a stately cedar tree. The Ascension of Moses. The vision of the burning bush appeared to Moses alone. The other shepherds with him saw nothing of it. He took 5 steps in the direction of the bush to view it at close range, and when God beheld the countenance of Moses, distorted by grief and anxiety over Israel's suffering, he spoke, "This one is worthy of the office of pasturing my people." Moses was still a novice in prophecy. Therefore God said to himself, "If I reveal myself to Moses in loud tones, I shall alarm him. But if I reveal myself with a subdued voice, he will hold prophecy in low esteem." Then he addressed him in his father Amram's voice. Moses was overjoyed to hear his father speak, for it gave him the assurance that he was still alive. The voice called his name twice, and he answered, "Here I am. What is my father's wish?" God replied, saying, "I am not your father, but I desired to refrain from terrifying you, therefore I spoke with your father's voice. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." These words rejoiced Moses greatly, for not only was his father Amram's name pronounced in the same breath with the names of the 3 patriarchs, but it came before theirs, as though he ranked higher than they. Moses said not a word. In silent reverence before the divine vision, he covered his face, and when God disclosed the mission with which he charged him of bringing the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, he answered with humility, "Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring forth the children of Israel?" Then spoke God, "Moses, you are meek, and I will reward you for your modesty. I will deliver the whole land of Egypt into your hand, and, besides, I will let you ascend to the throne of my glory, and look on all the angels of the heavens." Then God commanded Metatron, the angel of the face, to conduct Moses to the celestial regions, amid the sound of music and song, and he commanded him furthermore to summon 30,000 angels to serve as Moses' bodyguard, 15,000 to the right and 15,000 to the left. In abject terror, Moses asked Metatron, "Who are you?" And the angel replied, "I am Enoch, the son of Jared, your ancestor, and God has charged me to accompany you to his throne." But Moses demurred, saying, "I am but flesh and blood, and I cannot look on the countenance of an angel." Then Metatron changed Moses' flesh into torches of fire, his eyes into Merkabah wheels, his strength into an angel's, and his tongue into a flame. And he took him to heaven with a retinue of 30,000 angels, one half moving to the right of them, and the other half to the left. In the first heaven, Moses saw streams on streams of water, and he observed that the whole heaven consisted of windows, at each of which angels were stationed. Metatron named and pointed out all the windows of heaven to him: the window of prayer, the window of supplication, of weeping and of joy, plenitude and starvation, wealth and poverty, war and peace, conception and birth, showers and soft rains, sin and repentance, life and death, pestilence and healing, sickness and health, and many other windows. In the second heaven, Moses saw the angel Neriel, standing 300 parasangs high, with his retinue of 50 myriads of angels, all fashioned out of water and fire, and all keeping their face turned toward the Shekinah, while they sang a song of praise to God. Metatron explained to Moses that these were the angels set over the clouds, the winds, and the rains, who return speedily, as soon as they have executed the will of their Creator, and then proclaim the praise of God. In the third heaven, Moses saw an angel so tall it would take a human being 500 years to climb to its height. He had 70,000 heads, each head having as many mouths, each mouth as many tongues, and each tongue as many sayings. And he, together with his suite of 70,000 myriads of angels made of white fire, praised and extolled the Lord. "These," said Metatron to Moses, "are called the Iralim, and they are appointed over the grass, the trees, the fruits, and the grain. But as soon as they have done the will of their Creator, they return to the place assigned to them and praise God." In the fourth heaven, Moses saw a temple, the pillars made of red fire, the fence of green fire, the thresholds of white fire, the boards and hinges of flaming fire, the gates of carbuncles, and the pinnacles of rubies. Angels were entering the temple and giving praise to God. In response to a question from Moses, Metatron told him that they presided over the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, and the other celestial bodies, and all of them intoned songs before God. In this heaven, Moses noticed also the two great planets, Venus and Mars, each as large as the whole earth, and concerning these he asked to what purpose they had been created. Metatron explained that Venus lies on the sun to cool him off in the summer, or else he would scorch the earth, and Mars lies on the moon to impart warmth to her, lest she freeze the earth. Arrived in the fifth heaven, Moses saw hosts of angels whose lower parts were of snow and their upper parts of fire. Yet the snow did not melt, nor was the fire extinguished, for God had established perfect harmony between the two elements. These angels, called Isham, have had nothing to do since the day of their creation but praise and extol the Lord. In the sixth heaven were millions and myriads of angels praising God. They were called Irin and Kadishim, watchers and holy ones, and their chief was made of hail, and he was so tall it would take 500 years to walk a distance equal to his height. In the last of the heavens, Moses saw two angels, each 500 parasangs in height, forged out of chains of black fire and red fire. The angels, Aph, anger, and Hema, wrath, whom God created at the beginning of the world to execute his will. Moses was afraid when he looked at them, but Metatron embraced him and said, Moses, Moses, you favorite of God, fear not and be not terrified. And Moses became calm. There was another angel in the seventh heaven, different in appearance from all the others, and of frightful demeanor. His height was so great it would have taken 500 years to cover a distance equal to it, and from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet he was studded with glaring eyes, at the sight of which the beholder fell prostrate in awe. This one, said Metatron, is Samael, he who takes the soul away from man. Where does he go now? Asked Moses, and Metatron replied, to fetch the soul of Job the pious. Then Moses prayed to God in these words, Oh, may it be your will, my God and the God of my fathers, not to let me fall into the hands of this angel. Here in the highest heaven he saw also the seraphim with their 6 wings. With 2 they cover their face, that they gaze not on the Shekinah, and with 2 their feet, which, being like a calf's feet, they hide, to keep secret Israel's transgression of the golden calf. With the 3rd pair of wings they fly and do the service of the Lord, all the while exclaiming, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, and the whole earth is full of his glory. The wings of these angels are of prodigious size. It would take a man 500 years to traverse their length and their breadth, as from one end of the earth to the other. Then Moses saw in the 7th heaven the holy Hayyot, who support the throne of God, and he beheld also the angel Zagzazel, the prince of the Torah and of wisdom, who teaches the Torah in 70 languages to the souls of men, and thereafter they cherish the precepts contained as the laws revealed by God to Moses on Sinai. From this angel with the horns of glory, Moses himself learned all the 10 mysteries. Having seen what there is in the 7 heavens, he spoke to God, saying, I will not leave the heavens unless you grant me a gift. And God replied, I will give you the Torah, and men shall call it the law of Moses. Moses visits paradise and hell. When Moses was on the point of departing from heaven, a celestial voice announced, Moses, you came, and you did see the throne of my glory. Now you shall see also paradise and hell. And God dispatched Gabriel on the errand of showing hell to him. Terrified by its fires, when he caught sight of them as he entered the portals of hell, Moses refused to go farther. But the angel encouraged him, saying, There is a fire that not only burns, but also consumes, and that fire will protect you against the hellfire. So you can step on it, and yet you will not be burned. As Moses entered hell, the fire withdrew a distance of 500 parasangs, and the angel of hell, Nasargiel, asked him, Who are you? And he answered, I am Moses, the son of Amram. Nasargiel, this is not your place. You belong in paradise. Moses, I came to see the manifestation of the power of God. Then God said to the angel of hell, Go and show hell to Moses, and how the wicked are treated there. Immediately he went with Moses, walking before him like a pupil before his master, and thus they entered hell together. And Moses saw men undergoing torture by the angels of destruction. Some of the sinners were descended by their eyelids, some by their ears, some by their hands, and some by their tongues, and they cried bitterly. The women were suspended by their hair and by their breasts, and in other ways, all on chains of fire. Nasargiel explained, These hang by their eyes because they looked lustfully on the wives of their neighbors, and with a covetous eye on the possession of their fellow men. These hang by their ears, because they listen to empty and vain speech, and turn their ear away from hearing the Torah. These hang by their tongues, because they talked slander, and accustomed their tongue to foolish babbling. These hang by their feet, because they walked with them in order to spy on their fellow men, but they walked not to the synagogue, to offer prayer to their Creator. These hang by their hands, because with them they robbed their neighbors of their possessions and committed murder. These women hang by their hair and their breasts, because they uncovered them in the presence of young men, so that they conceived desire in them and fell into sin. Then Moses heard hell cry, with a loud and bitter cry, saying, "Give me something to eat, I am hungry." Nasargiel, what shall I give you? Hell, give me the souls of the pious. Nasargiel, the Holy One, blessed be He, will not deliver the souls of the pious to you. Moses then saw the place called Aluka, where sinners were suspended by their feet, their heads downward, and their bodies covered with black worms, each 500 parasangs long. They lamented and cried, "Woe to us for the punishment of hell! Give us death, that we may die." Nasargiel explained, "These are the sinners that swore falsely, profaned the Sabbath and the holy days, despised the sages, called their neighbors by unseemly nicknames, wronged the orphan of the widow, and bore false witness. Therefore, God has delivered them to these worms." Moses went then to another place, and there he saw sinners prone on their faces, with 2,000 scorpions lashing, stinging, and tormenting them, while the tortured victims cried bitterly. Each of the scorpions had 70,000 heads, each head 70,000 mouths, each mouth 70,000 stings, and each sting contained 70,000 pouches of poison, which the sinners are forced to drink, although the anguish is so racking that their eyes melt in their sockets. Nasargiel explained, "These are the sinners who caused the Israelites to lose their money, who exalted themselves above the community, who put their neighbors to shame in public, who delivered their fellow Israelites into the hands of the Gentiles, who denied the Torah of Moses, and who maintained that God is not the creator of the world." Then Moses saw the place Tithayawan, in which the sinners stand in mud up to their navels, while the angels of destruction lash them with fiery chains, and break their teeth with fiery stones, from morning until evening. And during the night they make their teeth grow again, to the length of a parasang, only to break them again the next morning. Nasargiel explained, "These are the sinners who ate carrion and forbidden flesh, who lent their money at usury, who wrote the name of God on amulets for Gentiles, who used false weights, who stole money from their fellow Israelites, who ate on the Day of Atonement, who ate forbidden fat, and animals and reptiles that are an abomination, and who drank blood." Then Nasargiel said to Moses, "Come and see how the sinners are burned in hell." And Moses answered, "I cannot go there." But Nasargiel replied, "Let the light of the Shekinah precede you, and the fire of hell will have no power over you." Moses yielded, and he saw how the sinners were burned, one half of their bodies being immersed in fire, and the other in snow, while worms lived in their flesh and crawled over them. The angels of destruction beat them incessantly. Nasargiel explained, "These are the sinners who committed incest, murder, and idolatry, who cursed their parents and their teachers, and who, like Nimrod and others, called themselves gods." In this place, which is called Abaddon, he saw the sinners taking snow by stealth and putting it in their armpits, to relieve the pain inflicted by the scorching fire, and he was convinced that the saying was true, "The wicked mend not their ways, even at the gate of hell." As Moses departed from hell, he prayed to God, "May it be your will, O Lord, my God and God of my fathers, to save me and the people of Israel from the places I have seen in hell." But God answered him, "Moses, before me there is no respecting of persons and no taking of gifts. Whoever does good deeds enters paradise, and he that does evil must go to hell." At the command of God, Gabriel now led Moses to paradise. As he entered, 2 angels came toward him, and they said, "Your time has not yet arrived to leave the world." And Moses answered, "What you say is true, but I have come to see the reward of the pious." Then the angels extolled Moses, saying, "Hail Moses, servant of God! Hail, Moses, born of woman, that has been found worthy to ascend to the 7 heavens. Hail to the nation to which you belong." Under the tree of life, Moses saw the angel Shamshiel, the prince of paradise, who led him through it and showed him all that there is therein. He saw 70 thrones made of precious stones, standing on feet of fine gold, each throne surrounded by 70 angels. But one of them was larger than all the others. It was encircled by 120 angels. This was the throne of Abraham. And when Abraham saw Moses and heard who he was and what his purpose was in visiting paradise, he exclaimed, "Praise you, the Lord, for he is good, and his mercy endures forever." Moses asked Shamshiel about the size of paradise, but not even he that is the prince of it could answer the question, for there is no one that can gauge it. It can be measured, nor fathomed, nor numbered. But Shamshiel explained to Moses about the thrones, that they were different one from the other, some being of silver, some of gold, some of precious stones and pearls and rubies and carbuncles. The thrones made of pearl are for the scholars that study the Torah, day and night for their own sake. Those of precious stones are for the pious, those of rubies for the just, those of gold for the repentant sinners, and those of silver for the righteous converts. The greatest of them all, continued Shamshiel, is the throne of Abraham, and the next in size the thrones of Isaac and Jacob. Then come the thrones of the prophets, the saints, and the righteous, each in accordance with a man's worth and his rank, and the good deeds he has performed in his lifetime. Moses asked then for whom the throne of copper was intended, and the angel answered, "For the sinner that has a pious son. Through the merits of his son, he receives it as his share." Again Moses looked and beheld a spring of living water, welling up from under the tree of life and dividing into 4 streams, which passed under the throne of glory, and then encompassed paradise from end to end. He also saw 4 rivers flowing under each of the thrones of the pious, one of honey, the second of milk, the third of wine, and the fourth of pure balsam. Beholding all these desirable and pleasant things, Moses felt great joy, and he said, "Oh, how great is your goodness, with which you have laid up for those that fear you, which you have created for those who put their trust in you, before the sons of men." Then Moses left paradise and returned to earth. At the moment of his departure, a heavenly voice cried out, "Moses, servant of the Lord, you that are faithful in his house, even as you have seen the reward that is laid up for the pious in the world to come, so also you will be worthy of seeing life in the world that shall be in the future time. You and all Israel, you shall see the rebuilding of the temple and the advent of the Messiah. Behold the beauty of the Lord, and meditate in his temple." In the world to come, Moses, besides sharing in the joys of Israel, will continue his activity as the teacher of Israel. For people will go before Abraham and request him to instruct them in the Torah. He will send them to Isaac, saying, "Go to Isaac, he has studied more of the Torah than I ever did." But Isaac in turn will send them to Jacob, saying, "Go to Jacob, he has had more conversation with the sages than I ever had." And Jacob will send them to Moses, saying, "Go to Moses, he was instructed in the Torah." by God Himself. In the Messianic time, Moses will be one of the 7 shepherds that shall be the leaders of Israel with the Messiah. Next, Moses declines the mission. End part 41 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.